30 minutes of terror in the streets of Paris looks to become the catalyst for a broad shift in international politics. With those well-coordinated series of strikes, the Islamic State put the threat of international terrorism back at the center of the international agenda. Joining us now to discuss is WSJ European security correspondent Julian Barnes. Welcome, Julian. Just last week, you and I were discussing whether the U.S. and Russia were heading into a new Cold War. So how big of a game changer are the November 13 terror attacks in Paris?
Well, you put it well, and that's exactly why this is a really quite a large potential game changer here. Now rather than competition between the U.S. and Russia, we're talking about should there be cooperation between the U.S. and Russia as they look to solve a problem that's foursquare on the agenda of terrorism emanating from Syria and other unstable states.
Right now, in Syria, Russia's tactic has been to back President Bashar al-Assad as a way of tackling the Islamic State. Now, this is not something the U.S. or France has approved of. Will the Assad question still prove to be a sticking point in any new alliance with Russia?
Well, it is the toughest question there because you're exactly right. The U.S. and France have said that Assad must go. They've said that repeatedly. But I think that we saw French President Francois Hollande say today he wanted to see more cooperation between all the outside parties intervening in Syria, meaning U.S. and Russia. We've seen Mr. Obama make some comments suggesting he may be open to more cooperation. So there's going to be a lot of pressure on Russia, France, the United States, Arab nations to get together and get on the same page in a strategy for Syria.
Now, speaking of the military strategy in Syria, how crucial is it to figure this out right away? Is boots on the ground the most logical solution?
You know, if you talk to some military analysts, they say, look, a lot of things have been tried over the last year or more, and it hasn't had a lot of impact on the ground. We still see advancing Islamic State forces. They've been turned back in some places, but they remain really strong. Airstrikes alone aren't doing much. They say to have more of a difference, you need to have a more substantial ground force. But President Obama has repeatedly said that is not in the cards. It's not a very welcome strategy in Europe either. And so I think we're going to have to see more concentrated airstrikes, perhaps some more working with directly with partner armies, but boots on the ground doesn't seem politically palatable, not yet.
Not yet, anyway. So, Julian, in these last hours, French President Hollande has asked to extend the state of emergency in France. He's also proposing changes to the French constitution that he says are needed to more effectively fight terrorism. Do you think NATO, at the request of President Hollande, will seek a new anti-terrorist coalition, as the U.S. did following the September 11th attacks?
Well, I spoke to NATO officials today, and I spoke to NATO officials over the weekend. That does not seem to be in the cards. Look, all the NATO countries are right now operating in Syria as part of the U.S.-led coalition, and creating a whole new structure to lead those attacks might be cumbersome. You saw stepped-up cooperation between France and the United States over the last 2 days, more intelligence sharing, more coordination on the strikes. I think we're going to see more of that rather than a broader NATO effort.
Now, do you think ISIS, just step back for a moment, could have direly miscalculated here? I mean, by creating so many fierce global enemies so quickly, did ISIS just mobilize a united global force that could crush them? I mean, after all, the enemies of my enemy are my friends.
You know what? It's a really good question. And that's why a lot of intelligence analysts, U.S. officials were scratching their head to a certain extent about focusing the attack on Paris, suggesting that this is a country that is not one to step back after such an attack, but one to redouble the effort. On the other hand, they have gotten the attention of the world, so we'll have to see over time whether it was a strategic miscalculation for ISIS or something that strengthens them.
And so, Julian, do you predict that the relationship with Russia and the Western countries, this new strength that's found in the past couple of days, do you think that that will hold?
You know, there's a lot of forces pulling apart at that relationship. But, you know, if we continue to see a string of terrorist attacks that hit both Russia and the West, you know, the pressure is going to be on to get the countries to work together. And maybe the West will bend to some of Russia's approaches, whether it is in Syria or elsewhere.
All right, Julian Barnes, thank you so much for that.
Thank you.